climatique et quels sont ces défis pour les IFD africaines. Alors, nous entrerons dans le vif du sujet. Et nous allons à présent demander aux différents experts, nous allons demander à le docteur Tony Okpanachi, directeur exécutif de la Banque de développement du Nigeria, Madame Rodnora Ratema, directrice générale de l'Association des entreprises du Kenya, Monsieur Georges Kubai, directeur exécutif de la coopération financière agricole du Kenya. Je vous prie de bien vouloir l'ovationner. Docteur Olasopo Olusi, directeur exécutif DG de la Bank of Industry du Nigeria. Bienvenue. Nous avons Chief Yemi Kale, directeur exécutif de la division recherche et coopération internationale de Afrixim Bank, représenté par Dr Christian Apolehath. Et à présent, nous avons Monsieur Olopus Mantanta, responsable de la division finances climatiques et environnementales de la Banque de développement de l'Afrique australe et coordonnateur du groupe de travail sur le changement climatique de l'AIAFD. Donc nous aurons 40 minutes pour les échanges et nous aurons également 10 minutes pour recueillir les commentaires. Je voudrais donc demander de bien vouloir ovationner Monsieur David Ahiachiabor, qui est le directeur exécutif financier de la Banque africaine de développement. Bien, j'espère que vous m'entendez très clairement. Merci, bienvenue à cette première table ronde. Alors, je ne vais pas m'éterniser sur les salutations. Je pense que la plupart des intervenants ont prononcé leur allocution en début de séance. Alors, nous allons explorer les défis et les opportunités que présentent auxquels les IFD africaines sont confrontés dans leur accès au financement climatique. Alors, j'ai ici une table ronde composée d'experts éminents. Donc, je vais donc formuler mes questions et j'espère que nous pourrons avoir des contributions pertinentes de la part de nos experts. Donc nous avons 40 minutes et je demanderai donc à nos experts de bien vouloir être le plus succinct et concis possible et d'éviter les répétitions. Alors Tony, si vous me le permettez, je vais commencer. Et premièrement, le premier sujet que nous aimerions aborder porte sur les stratégies auxquelles ces IFD africaines recourent pour accéder au financement climatique. Alors, pourriez-vous nous faire l'économie de l'expérience que vous avez au niveau de la DBSA? Alors, bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Permettez-moi d'abord de commencer mon allocution en remerciant AIAFD pour cette opportunité qui m'a octroyée et de l'invitation qui m'a été adressée pour me pencher sur une question ô combien cruciale pour l'Afrique. Alors, mesdames et messieurs, je voudrais juste vous présenter un peu la Banque de développement du Nigeria. C'est une institution de financement de développement dont l'objectif est d'apporter des financements aux PTME et en collaborant avec d'autres institutions financières. Voici un peu notre mode opératoire et nous sommes également donc une IFD. Donc à la Banque de développement du Nigeria, nous sommes très conscients de l'importance du financement climatique et en 2021, nous avons mis en place une stratégie de financement vert après 4 années d'opération et nous pensons que c'est la voie à suivre parce que nous
internally and also come out with clear priority areas where we think will enable us to achieve this objective of green finance. And the first thing we did was to look at even the projects and some of the PFIs we have financed, and we started tagging them green to see what percentage of our portfolio was really green in terms of that, to enable us have a baseline to be able to now move forward. The second thing we did was also see how do we engage externally to be able to catalyze more funding for that, because you know the funding out there required actually is more out there. And that came out when we did our next year 5-year strategy, which started this year, to see how do we engage to ensure we get. The first thing we did was to create a green finance line, again, specifically dedicated to financing green projects brought forward from our financial institutions that we partner with. And secondly, we also do it also, how do we also create capacity for them in them working with financial institutions. But because for us, the financial institutions we partner with include commercial banks, microfinance banks, and other financial institutions. So that was quite key to create capacity for them to be able to lend to that area. And then the third thing we did was even the micro, small, and medium enterprises themselves. How do you build capacity for them? So our approach to it was from internal perspective and then external perspective. Then we now know, of course, we need to catalyze funding and say again that also reach out to our other finance institutions that are focused on green. So from both perspectives, we brought green finance into forefront of whatever we do.
Thank you, Tony. Christian?
Hello, good morning, everyone. I just want to first thank the host country, Kenya, for hosting this event, ADFI, General Secretary and the Chairman. And thank you for giving the opportunity for Afrexim Bank to just share with you this panel and just speak about the climate finance and how we support actually as the developmental financial institutions Africa. So on behalf of the President, I greet you everyone and thank you. So just quickly, I don't want to take much of your time, but the bank has been heavily involved even in the climate change and climate financing. The bank is at present working with its partners. We are developing our climate finance strategy. And through this strategy, we shall provide line of credits to and in collaboration with our funders. And what we do is we work on different dimensions. First is to prepare a project preparation facility just to assist all sorts of projects that has some constraints and challenges. And then we have also our FEDA that provides some equity. We also provide line of credit. We have already prepared a big pipeline of projects. We are working in collaboration with the AU and the World Food Program just to assist also in the World Food Program crisis. So in a nutshell, the bank is just working hard on mitigating the risk of the climate change and try to assist the African countries, even when it has impact on the world food actually crisis and the food security. So this is quickly, maybe I can at a later stage go into details of what we have exactly done so far, but we have gone through local and regional actually projects. And one of them, for example, is the solar energy in South Sudan to generate electricity. Another one is for batteries in collaboration with Zambia government and DRC, also in collaboration with international institutions. So the bank is working actually with its partners, not alone. And this is how we try to reach the maximum benefit for the African continent in terms of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. And if we can just, yeah.
Thank you. I think mine is to basically say a little bit of what we've been doing as an institution. Agricultural Finance Institution is a key DFI in Kenya. In terms of our impact towards mitigation of the climate change, I think as an institution, despite the financial challenges that we face, which is basically similar to most of the African DFIs, we have been intentional around creating an impact around the mitigation of climate change. And I think as an institution, one of the ways in which we've been able to do this is basically supporting green projects in our country. We are partnered with Kenya Forest Services, basically to provide scenes, especially to primary schools where we have the so-called 4K clubs, basically which are usually clubs for young people that basically address the issue of climate change.
that exist for financing private sector to be compliant with climate change mitigation and adaptation. Like my brother Tony and all the other responders as my panelists have mentioned, look inwards first, and then we deal with the externalities. First thing to do that we did was to put together a sustainability framework and strategy to ensure that we identify where the opportunities are, particularly for private sector too, focusing initially on the mitigation side, which enables many of our customers and clients to adapt their sources of energy to cleaner sources and renewable energy. And then we progress to looking at other ways to promote mitigation. But that framework we put together internally. And we developed those programs that will help with the change in energy sources. And several, at least we supported hundreds, if not thousands of entities in Nigeria to adapt from fossil fuel energy to other cleaner sources. That's in the first instance. Even secondly, with our own operations, we are now adapting to make sure that we are compliant with standards, global standards on climate change. And we're starting to look out now externally at seeing where the opportunities lie, getting the right accreditation with the likes of global, the Green Climate Fund, working through the processes that are required for accreditation with the Adaptation Fund, and aligning ourselves with all those required or relevant certifications that are necessary to be able to access climate funds internationally. But one thing that we also did, we have 6 critical thematic areas that we've seen, that we identified as very important for Nigeria's development and growth in the short to medium term. One of them is climate and sustainability. And from that point of view, we've mainstreamed it in our strategy and in the way we support we assess our credit, and which helps to put it at the forefront of many of our clients who are willing to access funding from the bank of industry. And they now understand that it's very important to be compliant with the requirements of climate change mitigation and adaptation processes. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you, and I first want to, of course, thank AADFI for having me on the panel, representing Kenya Development Corporation. So Kenya Development Corporation is a DFI that was formed out of 3 developmental financial institutions that were merged in the year 2020 to therefore form Kenya Development Corporation. We therefore invest in various sectors, including manufacturing, infrastructure. We are key also in tourism and agri-processing. So of course, based on the various sectors we are investing in, we therefore are quite critical in terms of looking at the impacts the nature of projects we do have on the environment. KDC's strategy has been multifaceted. Number one, this starts actually from the country's strategy in terms of environmental and climate financing. Our president has actually declared himself on this as a country. Kenya hosted COP28, and which we declared in terms of what kind of projects we want to invest in, and what kind of facilities and support we want to give to investors within this space. Equally, as an institution, we've been looking at our strategy, and currently we're looking at our strategic plan and inculcating that into a strategic plan. One is also on greening KDC as a financial institution so that we get the relevant accreditations and we're able to access this financing from the various entities. Number 2 is actually also looking at the organizational structure, having the right skill sets, and we currently now have environmental specialists. We also have social impact specialists on our structure that assist us with from project conceptualization to actually project implementation, so that this issue of climate change is also also facilitated with the various investors, because for some projects they actually are not able to look at it from an environmental perspective. Equally, our other strategy that we're employing is the various partnerships, and we are looking at critical partners that we can work with. Currently, KDC is working with the World Bank in setting up a green fund. As an institution, you also need to look at the various instruments you'd need to use for this green financing. So part of the strategy we are employing as we look at our strategic plan is what kind of instruments, financial instruments, would we be able to create, therefore being able to access this funding. So I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nora. Olympus, please.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm honored to be part of this distinguished panel. I think just as a start, the drivers from our side, DBSA point of view, has really been as follows. You know, all the countries that are signatory to the UNFCCC are encouraged to be looking at more ambitious targets. And we know that there are already challenges, you know, achieving the targets that are in place. But the chief thing around the ability to implement activities that drive those targets is the availability of financing. So it is important that the right financing, the right instruments are in place to be able for those targets to be met. So that drives us from a DBSA point of view to say, are we putting in place instruments and offerings that are relevant to countries to help them in that transition? And I think immediately you do that, the quickest thing you start to realize is that obviously the resources, the public resources are limited. And therefore you need to be mobilizing private financing at scale. What it means for us then is to say the limited public resources should be used in an innovative manner in such a way that it allows you to crowd in private investment. So you will see that in most of the instruments that we have put in place from a DBSA point of view, what we seek to do is to use those limited resources to mobilize significant private sector financing. And I think another important thing for us has been partnerships. And these partnerships takes different forms. One of them would be with you know, your UNFCCC financing mechanisms like your GCF. And we know the challenges around that. But I think in spite of that, we have been, I would say, confident that we have been successful in many cases, in spite of the challenges, to be able to tap into significant resources that we then blend with our own resources to advance the climate agenda in South Africa and the region. So our target is really to ensure that the strategies that we put in place are there to support countries, to advance their NDCs, and make sure that the right instruments and offerings are in place. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you've all touched on a number of interesting points that I'm hoping we have enough time. The challenge is actually going to be having enough time to explore all these things in depth. One of the themes that is coming out is really the importance of mobilizing to support countries, to support clients. So Tony, if you can just give us a couple of examples of what you've been able to do in this space, and you know, what has worked, what are some of the challenges been? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, we had set up, we had a green finance line. We've been able to mobilize, we are in partnership with KfW. We're able to mobilize about 25 million euros specifically for green. And I'm glad to announce that about half of that has already been disbursed to a green project. So that's one specific we've done in that area. But beyond that, even from our own resources, we've also been able to partner with the Rural Electrification Agency of Nigeria to specifically to provide funding for mini-grid, solar panels, and all that for the micro, small, and medium enterprise players in that segment. So that has also been one particular project we're quite happy with, we've partnered with. Beyond that, we also, being a wholesale DFI, working with our participating financial institutions who also have green agenda as a focus. We've also provided specific incentives for them. I would mention one. We have interest drawback, for example, where we encourage financial institutions that lend green to be able to create some interest rebate for them where necessary to encourage them to lend to that. So that's something that we've done specifically, and we begin to see the result. Thirdly, fourthly, we also look in area of, especially when you look at the micro side, the micro retail end, and that's where a lot of capacity building, like I had mentioned before, is there. So some of the projects were also, projects were showcasing them to ensure that there's clear awareness of the importance of green finance going forward. And especially in the, when you look at the microfinance segment, where we also cater for. That is a key, a lot of challenge in that area. So we're also working with them and see how we can build capacity and provide access to funding for them.
Thank you. Christian, you started talking about projects in Sudan.
Thank you. Thank you for this one. In fact, I have so many things to say. As the chairman today was saying that let's translate the words into acts. And Afreximbank has done it. And we are proud to announce at least 3 of them now that shows the partnership, how Afreximbank is pulling the partnership together to just do some very important and viable projects in the continent. The first one, if I can just give an example of El Swidi, this is an Egyptian entrepreneur who is doing solar energy in South Sudan, and the bank has assisted, you know, in 46 million. Advanced in terms of financing, and this is ongoing project. A second one that has to do with the development of the special economic zone, and also the enhancement of the creation of batteries that will help Zambia and DRC, and this also in collaboration with UNECA, so you can see the government, the international institutions are on board, as well as the private sector. The third one that has to do with the facility provided here to Kenya, if I can just give some details about it. It's under the Climate Adaptation Facility for the government of Kenya. We have disbursed the first tranche of 800 million to Kenya Climate Change Adaptation Facility. So you can see the bank also is working with its actually partners in terms of members, countries, just to implement the facilities under the climate finance. I think I should stop here because this shows how the bank is really translating words into reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. And George, any examples from you?
Thank you, David. I think for us as Agricultural Finance Corporation, basically we've been internally been working with various sectors in the government sector, basically to address the issue of climate change mitigation, and to this effect, just like I mentioned before, one of the areas in which we have really been focused is the aspect of reforestation, where as a government, we've been very focused in terms of making sure that we increase our forest cover as a nation. And to this effect, I think Agricultural Finance Corporation has been very intentional in terms of its approach to this by making sure that we are able to lend resources towards that direction. And I think part of our portfolio greening has actually been directed towards that. And I think out of our total portfolio, we have actually given more than 5% of our resources towards that. Other than that, I think we've been trying to work with the international development partners to basically point resources, especially from the private sector, towards our institutions so that we can be able to scale up our level of indulgence into this particular space. Just the other day, we signed a cooperation agreement between Kenya Development Corporation and our institution, where basically we will be able to access more than 600 million shillings. That is supposed to be, part of it supposed to be geared towards the aspect of climate change mitigation strategies, especially in the ASAL regions, that is arid and semi-arid areas. And I think to that effect, as an institution, we are barely scratched, but there is a host of opportunities in that area. Despite the challenges that we faced, and I think the first challenge that you talked about was from a resources perspective, where basically, as much as maybe institutions want to play into that particular aspect, you realize that from a resource perspective, we are constrained. In terms of the period, of course, the period of these facilities also constraining in itself, and basically that basically shows that there is need and needs to be done to basically address that aspect. Thank you.
Thank you. BOI?
Thank you, moderator. So at the Bank of Industry, we have been very active in supporting communities and projects with climate mitigation and adaptation funding. Now, we established about 6 solar power mini-grid facilities for communities in the country. And this has helped many of them to develop, to adapt their programs and their energy sources to clean energy, particularly for their own production, industrial production endeavors. Secondly, we have an existing line of credit of about 100 million euros with the Agence Française de Développement, and about half of that has already been disbursed across various projects in the country. We are now, through various funding initiatives of our own, supporting the transformation of gas projects, prevention of gas flaring within the country. As you know, Nigeria has that challenge with gas flaring. We are an oil and gas nation. And the issue has been ongoing for several years, but many of the big oil and gas institutions in the country are now adapting, and we are financing many of them through huge projects from our own funding to enable that gas flaring to be turned into other beneficial projects for the country. So in the nutshell, there's quite a number of investment that has gone in from the Bank of Industry side, and also with the support of international community. And we believe that this is going to continue. We're in talks with a number of development partners, the IFC, the World Bank, on accessing funding that are dedicated to climate mitigation and adaptation in the country. And like I said earlier, we are really pushing on our efforts for accreditation. Thank you.
Thank you. Nora?
Thank you. So for Kenya Development Corporation, one is to be strategic in terms of the kind of products we are offering. As a country, if we are not experiencing drought, we're experiencing heavy rainfall, like we recently experienced 2 weeks ago. That definitely has a direct impact on businesses. So one of the things that we've been able to do is to create a product, and as my colleague has mentioned, specifically for the ASAL counties, to de-risk against loss of livestock. And so we came up with, together with the World Bank, a de-risking program that we are now financing pastoralists, so that then they are able to cash in on their animals in good time, as opposed to losing their livestock during the drought period, but also to be able to create a buffer so that they prepare for the drought, because we see it coming. Another product that we have developed as an institution is the climate financing, climate shock financing, which we now want to roll out as part of what we're going to do to support the recent flood businesses that were affected by the floods. And this is a product that we will institutionalize, and once we've been able to anchor it in the institution, it will then be able to attract a lot of other development partners to bring in resources into that fund. Equally, as a different instrument, KDC is looking at creating a green fund. So far we've set up a fund which has a seed capital of about $40 million. We're currently reaching out to various DFI institutions, both locally and internationally, and various pension funds to invest into the green fund. The fund will then directly invest into greening businesses, and in specific sectors. We're looking at e-mobility, as my colleague from Frexim has mentioned. They're really heavily supporting Kenya on that. We're looking at green buildings. So this green fund will be targeting to raise about $160 million. We've already raised the seed capital, so we are looking for partners to actually work with us on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Olympus, please.
Thank you. I'm sure it will be agreed that the subnational space is really where the rubber hits the road where climate is concerned. And I think from our end, especially because it happens to be an area of business where we have presence in, and we really started an early stage from a planning point of view, assisting municipalities in ensuring that their plans results in infrastructural projects that are fundable. But the key thing is you find most of the time those projects at the end of the planning process might not necessarily be best positioned for climate funds to be deployed. So what we do is we go earlier on and ensure that as municipalities plan, there is a clear understanding of how you integrate climate issues into the planning to ensure that the resultant plans are fundable from a climate financing point of view. And I think that, that has been key for us. But we have gone even beyond that to start thinking about how do you ensure that even issues around biodiversity, nature-based interventions are included as part of that integrated planning. That is very important, as you would know that, to approach climate in an integrated manner, you cannot, ignore the biodiversity and nature-based issues. And maybe let's just talk about adaptation broadly. So we ensure that that is taken care of earlier on. And I think it was also mentioned earlier, talking about adaptation, the challenges around, ensuring that financing is in place. And I think one of the key issues is the ability to develop instruments that are positioned for that. One thing that I just wanted to mention from a DBSA point of view that is quite recent has been the approval for funding alongside the GCF for a water reuse intervention, where we had approval of 235 million that we are matching from the DBSA point of view. And I think from an adaptation point of view, it's a very instrumental intervention, both in the public space, but also in the private space. And for us, that's the idea that I talked about earlier, to say, use limited public resources in an innovative and clever way to crowd in significant private sector investment. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry. No, thank you very much. I'm glad we had that question, because going back to, I think it was Tony Nyong, the keynote speaker, who said we mustn't just talk about the challenges, we must also talk about the opportunities. And I think what we've been able to demonstrate with that question is that there are lots of opportunities, and perhaps the challenge is getting things to scale, right? And so my next question is going to be a bit more focused around the challenges that you faced in your various institutions. Yeah, some of the challenges that you face. And I'd like to sort of take this question in two parts. I'd like to hear from the national DFIs first. DBN, DBN, KDC, Agricultural Finance Corporation, Bank of Industry. So hear what are the challenges from a national DFI perspective, and then perhaps ask Christian and Olympus to speak from a more regional DFI perspective, just to get an understanding of, where the challenges are similar and where they may be different. So Tony, if you can kick us off on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I'll just briefly mention 4. As in the first one is you don't have a comprehensive database of where this funding are. So you go out looking for a different area. So that's one key thing. The second one is like Dr. Young mentioned today, the process of even getting accreditation is quite tedious and very arduous, So going through that process alone. And to achieve that, you need to have the required technical skills, technical competence, technical capacity internally to be able to go through those rigorous process. And I think that's a major challenge I will also say. And part of the things, again, when you're presenting some of requests for some of this funding, do you have the robust pipelines of projects? So that's, I would say, 4 areas that I think are pretty much challenged. In the interest of time, I will just be brief on that.
In fact, thank you. In fact, you mostly said it all, but if I may add some, okay, that we as Afreximbank, we are facing always, is also the long tenor of this type of facility of renewable energy and climate finance. So it's a little bit difficult to find a long tenor. Also, the African bonds in terms of cost as well, it's not accredited as other international bonds. This is another constraint that add to the cost. And mostly the lack of preparedness of the African countries to prepare, like what he was saying, that we lack a concrete pipeline that helps us to advance the transactions, because I always say that we have the money is here. But whenever there are viable projects and attractive projects for the financiers, it's a matter of just preparing those projects. And that's why Afreximbank has done a lot of actually programs, side programs, to assist in the preparedness of those facilities and project finance. I'll just leave the floor to others.
Thank you, David. I think for me, the first one is about resources. Basically, when you look, most of the African development finance institutions are facing this challenge of capital adequacy and the resources. And you find that this is basically anchored by the fact that even from an international perspective, the way resources are located, basically there is always some element of or risk perception when it comes to African development finance institutions. And this basically skews the resources to countries where the financial system are more developed, and as a result, we keep on lacking in terms of this. The second part of it is also about technical capacity internally for most of the African development finance institutions. You realize that there is a need to develop technical expertise on matters climate financing, and this again plays against resourcing of resources towards these institutions. And I think lastly, it's also about lack of data around climate financing from most of the African development finance institutions. There is need to come up with relevant data that should be able to inform the right policy frameworks and also the right strategies that should be able to unlock the great potential that there is in terms of these resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A lot has already been said by my colleagues on the panel, but and I don't want to repeat any of them for the sake of time. But for the sake of emphasis, I want to point to the issue of the perception of risk. Yep. Now, that is very critical because that creates a situation where the funding does not get into the right projects. And as long as we have that challenge, it will be difficult to finance any project that looks at mitigating and addressing climate change issues. Now, we believe that our insurance companies need to play a greater role in de-risking this sector. There needs to be a greater push by many of our innovators in the financial industry to come up with solutions to address this perception of riskiness of green projects. And that, I think, is going to be one of the ways forward. Thank you.
Thank you. From KDC's perspective, not looking to repeat what my colleagues have said, I think one of the challenges that we've experienced and seen is the lack of standardization in terms of policies or what are the greening requirements for the different entities that have these funds. If this could be standardized, so you're forced to comply, based on where you want to access the funding from, which definitely becomes also another costly affair. My colleague has also mentioned lack of expertise. Of course, this is a huge challenge for African DFIs. Without those expertise, and if at all you're accessing these funds, most of the time it will come with technical assistance, which allows you then to get an expert on board. That tells you lack the capacity internally to be able to access this funding. Also, the high upfront costs that are involved in accessing the funds and in also developing the pipeline. Remember, for you to be doing these investments, they are high-cost investments based on the from the investor's perspective, meaning they need a very huge cash outlay. Therefore, the riskiness of carrying out these investments within the greening space and the duration it takes also is what a lot of these DFIs face as challenges in terms of looking at the return on investments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the common theme you hear, especially among developing countries, is a legitimate one around the expectations in terms of financing that is made available as per commitment from the donor countries versus what we see on the ground. And this, I guess, is made worse by the current global tensions that we are having, where attention is shifted elsewhere as opposed to the commitments that have been made. But I think the flip side of that is to say, when you talk about the available resources, the question becomes, are we really successfully tapping into those resources? And that talks to back to what has been mentioned around the capacity to really put together programs and projects that are investable. And that goes back to talking about capacity issues. And, we've just been having meetings with our colleagues around the, working group on climate change within ADFI. And those are the specific issues that we see as key to unlock, so that we don't only talk about the resources being made available, but we can demonstrate that at least for the resources that are there, we are able to deploy. I think for me, that is quite key. But I think when you talk to that, you can't escape the question of saying, how do you do that if you look at instruments that you want to deploy versus the indebtedness of countries in the continent? How do you get around that? So I guess the question becomes, should we be looking at, swapping the debt for climate financing? Is that the right instruments? Probably we need to be looking at those questions and saying, what is the right responses? Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Thank you very much. First of all, it's been a very rich discussion. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to touch on all the issues, but the MC is giving me the evil eye, and I don't, I don't want to make any enemies. So what I'm going to, I'd like to try and get to some of the questions we have on Menti. So I'll just go through them very quickly. If I can have them up one by one, please. And then if anyone on the panel wants to react. So the first one is, who are the specific FIs that fund DFI's green projects? Anyone want to take that?
I think, like we mentioned, if you listen to that, there are several. the World Bank, the KFW, the AFD, and several others. I think in terms of, there are several out there who are willing to fund. The challenge is, how do you assess them? How do you ensure that you're able to present your projects to attract the funding? So there are several. I think in terms of that, I would say, to answer that specifically.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think it's becoming more and more mainstream. So essentially, we are getting to a point where if you are not doing quote unquote green, whatever that means, you're not going to be able to access international finance. And part of the issue is what qualifies as green, because what qualifies as green in Kenya is different from what may qualify as green in Egypt, which may be different from what qualifies as green in France or the UK or wherever. So that's a big part of the issue. Question 2, and I think we touched on this. Question 2 is about risk perception. And it says, it's been said that the perception of risk is a major hindrance to accessing, I would say, achieving the 2.7 trillion, because the 2.7 trillion is not there yet. We need to find it. Yeah. How do we overcome this, individually or collectively? Any takers? Christian?
Thank you very much. I think we need to prepare ourselves. We always blame others, but we need also, we ourselves, start to work within the African continent, starting from the government, financial institutions, private sector, capacity building, and so forth. If we are ready with this portfolio and with this project pipeline, we'll be able to access the market, and easily, by the way. As I mentioned earlier, the financiers are looking for viable projects. We need to start, everything in parallel, not in sequential, because sequential, it will take a lot of time. But we need to be well prepared from the capacity building, from the project preparations, from access to partners who are really keen to work with us and work in the African continent, because I think this is the most lucrative continent now in the world to make business and investment. Thank you.
And just to add to that, and again, going back to the opening, I keep coming back to the point about, yes, climate change is a challenge, but in that challenge, there's also lots of opportunity. I mean, we look at the renewable energy landscape in Kenya. That, and I think there's a number, I think it's, I won't mention a number because I'll probably get it wrong. So on to the next question. We are aware that Africa is the least contributor to the climate change crisis, but the biggest receiver of the catastrophes from climate change, and least recipient of global climate funding. How do we navigate this? Any takers? Olympus?
Yeah, I think for me it talks to maybe some of the points that we've already mentioned, and it's really around the capacity, within institutions and maybe even within countries to be able to tap into these resources. I was having a conversation with colleagues that it is very interesting that every time there's a new mechanism set up to finance any initiative, Africa always starts at readiness, while others are tapping into the financing. And I think the problem is that when we respond to one initiative, we don't build a base that is sustainable for the future. So we need to change our thinking and make sure that even as we talk about, let's say, GCF now and readiness for GCF, we think beyond that. We build a base that outlives that initiatives and can benefit us in the next initiatives that comes up. Thanks.
Thank you, Olympus. Next question. What opportunities do you have for MSMEs for accessing capacity building, financing, and sensitization? I see DB and Bank of Industry here.
Yeah, I think very interesting, because once we hear MSME, that resonates well with us. So that's why I was smiling. Yeah, I think in terms of capacity building, yes, I'd mentioned before that working with the PFIs we of course provide capacity building for them, showcase some of the green projects that have been financed, especially for the MSMs themselves, because that's quite key for them. So we provided that across the country at different levels, even at the rural area, just to let them understand the opportunities available for that. So I think that in terms of capacity availability is quite huge, something that DBN is quite strong on, and I'm sure BOI too are very strong in that area, providing those capacity, using experts to train where necessary, using experts to get their projects ready to be funded as a green project. So those capacities are something that DBN is doing, and I'm sure Shubotu will also confirm that BOI2 is also in the area.
I'll stand on your existing responses, Tony, so thank you very much. Yes, but I want just to say that BOI does not only focus on MSMEs. You know, MSMEs account for only about 10 to 15% of our portfolio. But to shed more light, yes, what we've been doing is to encourage, we work through a number of business development service providers to make sure that we improve the capacity of MSMEs to access funding. And part of their KPIs includes this creation of awareness amongst MSMEs on the opportunities for accessing green funds. And I believe that that has been quite successful in the recent times, and we will continue to ramp up efforts on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from the panel? No. I think it's a good place to end. I've been looking at the questions, and the next few questions I think are sort of around the next panel discussion. It's about verification, about institutions providing support, and that hopefully will be dealt with in the next panel. So first of all, thank you very much to my expert panel for the answers, for the lively discussion. Thank you for being such an engaging and engaged audience. And thank you, moderator, for forgiving us for going over time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A big round of applause. I kindly request that you stand so that we can take a photo. And Mr. David, we know you moderated the panel, but we want you to moderate the dance style. Any step, it's Africa, it's Africa. Simple, simple. We'll do it together, we'll do it together.
Well, you have to teach.
Okay, let's go, everybody, let's take the photo first, okay? All right, a big round of applause to them. Let's all be upstanding. Okay. Okay. Step, okay, let's step. Everybody, let's go. Everybody, come on. Okay. Okay, Madam Nora is doing it well. Everybody, hands up. Everybody, A big round of applause for them. Well done, well done. Good stuff, good stuff, good stuff. Thank you so much indeed. Time for Africa, well done, well done. First, yes, we've taken the group photo already. Yes. Thank you, welcome, Dr. Christian. Up next, 40 minutes. Please note, 40 minutes we'll be having a timer. Once you hear this sound, that means you have only 2 minutes left. 40 minutes for the interview, for the panel engagement, 10 minutes for questions. Ladies and gentlemen, up next, a big round of applause to Amanda Achibong, Senior Partnerships Manager, Africa Global Center on Adaptation. Nagnuma Kone, Senior Regional Business Development Lead, Africa Global Green Growth Institute. A big round of applause for them as they come. Africa Climate Change Fund representative, Nirmit Ved, General Manager, Export-Import Bank, India, Exim Bank, India. Honorable Susan Mangeni, Principal Secretary, State Department of MSMEs Development. Representative as well, Eduardo Freitas, Regional Manager, Africa Green Climate Fund. A representative from Global Environmental Facility, 40 minutes. What are the support systems available to African institutions in mobilizing climate finance? The moderator, the head of climate and environmental finance and coordinator of the working group on climate change of ADFI, Olympus Manthata. Where are you? A big round of applause for him, please. Welcome. Take your seat. 40 minutes. Once you're ready, we'll start the countdown.
Thank you very much, moderator. I just wanted to, am I audible? Thank you. I just wanted to indicate that we had planned to have both the GEF and the GCF as part of this panel. Unfortunately, we have not been able to pull that off. So what we thought we would do as part of context setting, we're going to play a video. I hope the colleagues on the technical side are ready. It would be an address from the GCF. If that is ready, please play. Can you sort out the sound?
Remain strong, and will use the new programming cycle 2024 to 2027 to further accelerate investments in Africa. Good day, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and partners. We are pleased to connect with you virtually. I'm Nonda Zindala, the Deputy Director for Country Programming at GCF. Esteemed Secretary General Mr. Okoye, AFRIC colleagues, and participants, thank you for this opportunity to present the Green Climate Fund product offering at the annual workshop themed A Practical Roadmap for African DFIs in Accessing Green Funds. GCF prioritizes African states, LDCs, and small island developing nations in its programming. Of the 128 entities accredited with GCF, only 22 are from Africa, 11 of which are financial institutions and development banks. So we are already collaborating with some of you. As you are aware, accredited entities lead the design and implementation of climate change projects, while GCF provides a secondary due diligence role. Our commitment to the continent remains strong, and we'll use the new programming cycle 2024 to 2027 to further accelerate investments in Africa. Let me give you a high-level view of GCF portfolio in Africa. As of April 2024, GCF has approved 104 projects, including 19 multi-regional projects, culminating in a total of 4.3 billion of GCF investment, complemented by 14.5 billion of core investments by our partners. GCF has also approved about $205 million in readiness support to countries in the continent. These investments are in sectors such as energy access, energy efficiency, early warning systems, agriculture and food security, forest protection, amongst others. Approximately 35% of GCF's global mitigation funding goes to Africa. 22 direct access entities for a continent as vast as Africa falls short of what is required to meaningfully support climate action. As part of our sharpened focus on country ownership, The number of accredited entities in Africa is expected to increase in the coming years, enabling us to achieve our strategic objective of doubling programming with direct access entities. We are working with NDAs, prioritizing countries where there are no DAEs, fast-tracking those that are in process to ensure that the continent has sufficient DAE coverage. We will also are committed to growing our regional DAE portfolio to adequately cover multi-country and regional projects. Recently approved multi-country projects includes the Rural Climate Adaptation Finance Mechanism for East Africa with IFAD. The program introduces a practical and widely applicable financing model to mobilize private sector investments to rural climate change adaptation initiatives in East Africa. This covers Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, SMMEs and smallholder farmers involved in food systems. GCF financing in this case is $55 million. The other project is the Infrastructure Managed Resilient Fund with AFC. This is a $240 million project of GCF, Junior First Loss Equity Investment, aiming to catalyze investments from private sector investments and pension funds to benefit up to 50 million people directly and 144 million people indirectly by securing reliable infrastructure services covering 19 countries: Benin, Cameroon, Chad, Cote d'Ivoire, Democratic Republic of Congo, Djibouti, Gabon, Gambia, Ghana, Guinea, Kenya, Mali, Mauritania, Namibia, Nigeria, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, Togo, and Zambia. It is important to underline that seeking and obtaining accreditation is more of a means than an end on itself. As of October 2023, more than half of accredited DAEs, 43 out of 75, are without approved funded projects. While we have a role to play in collaborating with government and regional bodies to improve accreditation, we encourage African entities to work on developing concept notes and funding proposals for GCF investments, leveraging readiness resources to ensure quality and entry. In addition to accreditation pathway, partnership with African financial institutions are welcome through existing accredited international or direct access entities. For instance, many of the investment projects of large international financiers have approved GCF projects which require partnerships with national financing institutions as implementing or executing partners. Many international and regional accredited agencies have projects that entails developing financing vehicles, de-risking instruments, and capacity building, whose implementation rests on partnership with relevant financing institutions in your respective countries. In addition to the accreditation pathway, other options for direct partnership with GCF include the project-specific assessment approach, PSAA, which is currently being piloted. This instrument enables the review and accreditation of a specific project instead of institutional accreditation. We also encourage co-financing opportunities, pooling resources and expertise to significantly enhance project impact. Additionally, our blended finance approach combines concessional GCF funding with commercial finance, making projects more viable and attractive to investors. Our aim is to work with national and international partners to diversify and expand project portfolios with climate-related initiatives. GCF's concessional funding can lower the risk profile of projects, providing financial instruments that help manage and mitigate risk. Additionally, we can facilitate access to an extensive network of partners and resources and offer capacity building that strengthen your ability to develop and manage climate projects effectively. To illustrate the potential impact, consider our collaboration with the Development Bank of Rwanda on the Rwanda Green Investment Facility. This project aims to significantly improve agriculture productivity and food security through advanced irrigation systems and climate-resilient crops. Such initiatives not only address immediate climate challenges, but also lay the foundation for long-term sustainable development, enhancing economic stability and community resilience. We remain committed to facilitating the flow of finance to the ground through effective partnerships. We are keen to discuss further with you how and when this partnership can be most beneficial. I invite you to explore specific ideas with us and engage in a dialogue on how we can collaborate to drive climate action and sustainable development. I further invite you to remain in active engagement with our respective NDAs and regional managers for further information on national priorities for climate action and partnership opportunities with the GCF. Thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. Looking forward to the opportunity for in-person meetings.
Thank you very much, technical team. I think what we discussed in the previous panel sets a good basis for the next discussion, which is really about ensuring that we have robust support systems that would allow for effective mobilization of climate finance. I don't know about you, but normally when I hear about the numbers in terms of what we require for climate financing versus what is on the ground, it can be discouraging. Sometimes you think we are blowing in the wind because the figures in terms of what is on the ground and what is required, the gap is quite significant. So I think maybe it becomes important to shift the conversation away from more emphasis around capital needed to key elements needed to build transition ecosystems that can ensure investors, both public and private sector, make the right decisions. I think maybe the question around support systems should be embedded in that. And I would hope that, together with our panel, we'll, seek to address that. I mean, issues around, planning and policy for financing within countries, I think becomes important. Creating a robust pipeline of projects, and for that, having the right mechanisms in place to do that becomes quite key. And I think this just emphasizes the need for these support systems to be in place. So I think maybe as a start, I'm just going to let the panel just talk to, maybe before we go into specific questions, specific initiatives from your respective institutions around this type of support that we are talking to. I've seen from the previous moderator that when he wants to make sure you are finishing, he pulls the mic up. So I'm going to copy that, and hopefully I'll derive the right reaction from your side. But I'll start from this side, and then we just move along. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. It's very nice to be here. And not hoping to start on a note of gloom, but I just want to paint the picture again, in terms of the financing and, what the needs are, etc. As we know already, global climate financing is actually on the rise globally. For Africa, it's not the case. I mean, if we look at between 2021 and 2022, there was actually an increase of what had obtained before from 653 million to 1.3 trillion in global climate financing available. But for Africa, and I'll talk on adaptation specifically, only 20% of global climate finance has been seen to be getting to the continent. And when we compare this, just to put in context, with what is received by Asia or the Pacific of 45% annually, we can see a massive gap. And then, of course, our NDCs show that we need a lot more than what we are getting. So just to lay that out again for us, without sounding like a prophet of doom, at the GCA, we're working with the African Development Bank on what we call the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program to mobilize financing for adaptation specifically, amounting to 25 billion over 5 years. And what I want to explain is that the engagements, what we're seeing is that the engagements needs to be done at multiple levels, not just, at one level. So the triple AP, as we like to call it, is engaging at the level of the MDB, looking at sectoral levels, looking at agriculture, infrastructure, also at the level of DFIs, working with DFIs, and more recently and in the plans, working with commercial banks. At the sectoral level, for example, on infrastructure, what we are seeing is that we're helping or working on, what we're doing is that we're working to support investments of the bank, looking at specific assets. So if I give an example, in the infrastructure, working with the bank on its port of Cotonou in Benin, expansion and enhancement project. And the idea is to provide the support that is needed to raise the adaptation and the climate resilience of that project, of that specific project. And what we're looking at is saying, how can we provide the assistance to look at the climate stress tests that are needed, and conducting the climate vulnerability assessments that are needed, and also providing the investment profile that can be used to mobilize additional resources for that project. And so whether it's the climate stress test and what, giving analysis of what are the potential scenarios of climate impact on that project, looking as well as the vulnerability assessments, we were able to mobilize additional concessional financing of 80 million on that project, because the justification, the clarity, the understanding on the adaptation needs and the adaptation costs were clear and evident. So that's just an example in terms of that, in terms of the sectoral angle. And on the DFIs, we're working, for example, I'll just give an example again, with the the Tanzanian Agricultural Development Bank, to really see how to also strengthen the adaptation on their investments. And so looking at the value chains, how can we strengthen the adaptation investments in that portfolio? So I'll just stop for there, just to give an example of what's being done, and then I can go further on the other initiatives.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was thinking I'm not lifting the right angle, but thank you. Maybe let's hear from GGGI.
Thank you very much for having us here today. So I'm Nanyu Makone from the Global Green Growth Institute, and our headquarters is based in Seoul, South Korea, and our regional office is actually in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire. So I'm going to take this from another angle, which is how do we first, before even getting to the DFIs, ensure that we in Africa have the enabling environment that is actually needed to set up the pace and the architecture to absorb climate finance, because this is the biggest challenge we have. So one of the things we do is that with our member countries, we always do what we call a gap assessment, which is an economic modeling that we undertake to see what is already existing and what are the gaps that the countries need. From there, we can be able to support countries develop effective strategies and methodologies that will help them leapfrog to the issues that they first need to solve. If it is an issue of strategy, how can they then develop the effective strategies that is actually needed, which is country-specific and fit for purpose to be able to mobilize the finance that they need. And we do that by also working with the countries, first through either it's the Ministry of Climate, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Finance, etc. And through the development of effective strategies and methodologies, we actually see that countries, especially that we work with who are member countries, can be able to rapidly absorb finance through perhaps the GCF. So at GGGI, our focus is supporting countries actually move from a brown economic model to a green economic model. So to move into green economic models, it actually encompasses a lot of instruments that need to be in place. We've already spoken at the national level, what are the gaps assessments that are needed. We do economic simulation model, we do green growth indexes, which can be able to assess the level at which a country is in terms of green economic and what is actually needed to move. And then through those gaps that we see through the simulation models that we take, we are able to help countries if it is capacity development. What kind of capacity do they need? So capacity development has to be targeted. You cannot say that Africa has an issue in mobilizing climate finance without first understanding what the issues are. Through clear understanding of what the issues are, you can be able to support countries develop the right instruments, the right policies, and hence the right infrastructure that is needed. So we work through a lot of sectors, from climate smart agriculture to e-mobility, etc. And one of the ways, for example, that we support DFIs is to help them to become accredited to the GCF. And that is because we also support countries, NDAs, to be able to support readiness. And one thing we've noticed is that with readiness, there has to be models, especially in Africa, that we can establish, such as PPP models that brings together the government, the private sector, and also DFIs, in order to actually speed up the mobilization of climate finance. And that is first understanding what is the rationale for development projects that are needed. One of the biggest issues that we've seen is that in a lot of the DFI's projects that we support, and also countries trying to access climate finance, is there's a lack of understanding of the climate change rationale which is needed. So through helping them develop the climate change rationale in the project, we are able to support first, quickly accelerating access to climate finance. Secondly, ensuring that we are not just accessing the climate finance, but also developing an enabling and sustainable environment that will ensure that they develop at the same time pipeline of projects that are investment worthy and also bankable. So that's a little bit about GGG and what we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to indicate that I promised my colleagues in the working group, at the working group on climate change, that you are going to be working with us. So I just want to commit you while you are on the platform. Let's pass on to Rita.
Okay, thank you very much, Olympus, and it's also a pleasure to be here. I work with what I call an instrument which is often needed but less talked about or less appreciated. This is grants. A lot of the discussions we've had here, we know the importance that grants could play in helping our DFIs even put in place the foundational aspects that are required for them to develop this green pipeline of projects that we so often talk about, to help them also build the internal capacities that they need to be able to do this continually as a business model. So allow me to introduce to you the Africa Climate Change Fund. As the African Development Bank, you know it's a large institution that offers various financing instruments. However, what is maybe less known to various groups is that the bank also has these technical assistance facilities, which it aims to utilize that to help, first of all, lay the foundation work for it to come in, and also other financial institutions to come in to invest in climate change in Africa. So this fund was established 10 years ago, and not again to go to the gloom side, it was at the backdrop of countries beginning to develop their INDCs and going to Paris to discuss the Paris Agreement. And so there was a big discussion about developing bankable projects that, help the continent to address the impacts of climate change. And there was a great concern that African institutions don't have the projects to be able to access some of these climate funds that we are talking about, we know of. And to an extension, DFIs are facing this issue. So the fund was established primarily to support government ministries, department agencies, subnational governments, and non-governmental organizations, largely to develop a project. So it was sort of a project preparatory facility to help us develop bankable projects in line with countries' NDCs. And so in this context, I may not be speaking too much to the DFIs, but the good news is that as ACCF, while we may not be able to provide these grants directly to DFIs, we've been able to provide grants through bank-led projects or initiatives such as the African Financial Alliance on Climate Change. Some of you may know this facility or this initiative, which is a bank-led initiative bringing together a coalition of financial institutions, some of whom are in this room, to mobilize private sector capital. AFAC has started some years ago and realized that, well, the awareness raising is good, but we need to do practical things in these institutions to demonstrate that we can use technical assistance grants to leverage indeed more private sector. I'm sure a lot of you are in the room thinking, oh, this is another talk shop, but be rest assured that initiatives such as AFAC and one other initiative at the bank, which is the Africa Green Bank, not financed by ACCF, of course, but is doing, the practical things that other financial institutions can learn from. So Olympus, if you allow me, I just want to focus on one example of the what AFAC is doing with the funding support from the ACCF. So it's supporting African ESG taxonomy development to establish clear standards for sustainable activities and financial products from an African perspective. So the aim here also, and taking one practical example again from the AFAC case, is that it's providing technical assistance to the Tanzania Agricultural Development Bank with the support of my colleague here, David. And this work is just commencing, but we believe that it will help, first of all, the Tanzania Agricultural Development Bank to really assess its climate risk, to screen its portfolio and see how it can mainstream clearly climate change into it and develop a sound pipeline that we can all point to and say these are indeed projects that are coming out of these development banks. I see your mic is raised. Allow me to reiterate a point that was made. I think charity begins at home. We are looking towards the GCF, we are looking towards all these various financial instruments that seem cumbersome to achieve. But I think as DFIs, if you look internally and you even develop technical assistance proposals to come to the bank or other institutions and say, help us to do this practically within. Help us to identify this green pipeline of projects that can be leveraged on to access more resources. I always believe in starting from your home, so I just wanted to reiterate that point that was made by another panelist. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's hear from Exim, India.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, and a pleasure being here on this elite panel, and thank you AADFI for inviting us. I represent an organization which is a development financing institution 100% owned by the government of India, which finances and facilitates the country's international trade and investment. As far as the sustainable finance, climate finance is concerned, the bank is very active, and I can say ahead of our peers in supporting this endeavor. Basically, we raise money through a variety of bonds, and in the year 2015 and again in the year 2023, we have gone ahead and raised sustainable finance bonds from the markets, and basically the funding of these funds are towards our endeavor in the sustainable finance sector. In 23, we raised a 10-year benchmark size sustainable bond, which became the largest ever single tranche investment grade issue out of India. The proceeds of these bonds are specifically used in projects in sectors like renewable energy, clean transportation, access to better infrastructure, affordable housing, and wastewater management. One of the flagship programs that we have at Exim Bank of India is the Lines of Credit program, which is supported by the government of India, and the funds that we raise from the markets are used for capacity building in the renewable energy sector in the developing countries. So far, we have funded around 26 projects valued at more than $1.2 billion across 12 countries in the African continent. Additionally, we are also looking at some co-financing opportunities with other institutions in the African region, whereby we can join hands together and extend financing for sustainable finance and climate finance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think just looking at our time, hopefully we can be able to go for a next round of questions. I'm not sure if we'll get to the floor, but hopefully let's see how it goes. Amanda, if I can send the first question through to you. How is your entity addressing the specific needs and challenges faced by the continent, but maybe more specifically, DFIs?
Yeah, so in my introduction, I tried to present what the flagship program that we have is doing, the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, really looking at the issue of adaptation given our mandate, and how to strengthen the lending portfolios of DFIs to ensure that they have climate resilience and risk, mainstreamed in therein. And so I mentioned that we have started with the African Development Bank, but of course working with other MDBs. And on the DFIs specifically, really trying to ensure that, the technical assistance that is needed to be able to strengthen their ability to assess their lending portfolios and assess the risk in their lending portfolios. Basically, the risk their lending portfolios is done. Oftentimes, we know that the gaps are there, but it's about this quick technical assistance that can be provided, and that's sort of what we are there for, to say how can we provide this quickly to be able to, whether it's quick, rapid stress tests, whether it's climate vulnerability assessments, to be able to strengthen and de-risk that lending portfolio. So I was giving the example briefly with the Tanzania Agricultural Development Bank, and looking and really saying that beyond the assessments and all of this, also providing the training that is needed to the staff members to be able to ensure that they have the understanding of the risks in the lending portfolio, and looking at whatever value chain it is, in this case the peanut value chain that we are supporting. What is it that, how can they be able to say, okay, we have a clear mapping and a clear understanding of the climate risks that are obtainable on this value chain. And I think the importance of contextualizing to the needs of the specific DFI is also key, because there are different needs at different levels. And so what we're doing is tailoring this technical assistance specifically to what the needs of that DFI is, as the case may be. We're also working, just wanted to give further examples with the La Banque Agricole in Senegal, to help them with their project preparation to access green climate funding. And that has to do with basically looking through, giving that technical assistance as well, to be able to help them prepare those projects to be able to submit. So I think, in summary, just wanted to give those examples of what exactly we're doing.
Thank you very much. Maybe just following from that, we can talk to collaborations and partnerships that are key in supporting DFIs. If you'd like to take that one.
Thank you. I think that for the region, collaboration and partnership is really instrumental. There's no way DFIs can be able to mobilize the finance by themselves, and there's no way governments can be able to mobilize climate finance alone without also the role of the private sector and the DFIs, and as well as development partners. However, in order for that to happen, there has to be clear mechanisms that allow this partnership to be also to be effective, efficient, sustainable in the long term, but also impactful. So, for example, with GGGI, one of the ways in which we supported a DFI here, we're talking about the Banque Nationale de Côte d'Ivoire, is to be able to get accreditation also to the GCF. But in addition to that, support them with the development and submission to the GCF and mobilization of finance from the AFDB for the Energy Fund. In addition to that, we've had recently about the AFC. GGGI was also instrumental in working together with the AFC in order to get the 250 million that we received from the GCF. Working with national institution for us is really key, and it's paramount, because we believe that is actually the foundation. For that to happen, for example, in Rwanda, we supported the establishment of the National Financial Vehicle for NERWA that you know, and in Ethiopia for the CRGE facility. One of the things we know is that by establishing national financial vehicles, you enable that PPP framework to be able to be established. In Kenya, we're in the process of doing the same thing, as Kenya is becoming a member of GGGI in the next few months, hopefully. So for us, I think partnership collaboration is not only essential, but it has to be done in a very strategic way. And when we talk about strategy, for example, is to ensure that whatever we're going to be doing in partnership has to not only to build the capacity of the national entities, here we're talking about NDAs, but also for the national financial institutions. For example, one of the ways in which we build capacity is through one of our programs, which is called the Transformative Climate Finance Program of the African Union, a Green Recovery Action Plan. And what we do there is that we have what we call a Green Finance Roundtable that we do. So the Finance Roundtable brings together DFIs from around Africa, but also financial ministries of finance, people who actually do the laws, and ministries of environment. we bring them together to the same table and we say, okay, let's talk, let's have a conversation. Why don't we understand each other? Obviously, there's an issue of knowledge gap. So how do you bridge the knowledge gap? By bringing people together to sit together. I understand, the government understands what we mean by bankability, what is investment ready, and how do I get my project to be investment ready? And what we define as a pipeline of projects. And this is a lot of the issues we say. A lot of government tell us, oh, we do have a pipeline, but when you look at the pipeline, you're like, no, you don't have a pipeline yet. But there are ways we can make this, what you have right now, become a pipeline. But at the same time, DFIs do not fully understand government. So how do we bridge that knowledge gap? You have to bring them together. And one of the ways we do that is through our two times a year green climate investment roundtables. We also bring in government, ministries, agencies, the people who develop these concept notes. They have to start having a dialogue, and that's what we call capacity building. But capacity building is not just about sitting and getting somebody to train you. It is about communicating and coming up with innovative ways to develop innovative solutions. So yeah, that's how we develop partnership. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we always decry the fact that from a continent point of view, we always are sort of lagging in terms of access to climate finance. I don't know if you want to talk to concrete steps we can take to change that picture.
Thank you, Olympus. I think I'll take the example of and this is going out of the discussion a little bit, but looking at various financing instruments available. I think in the morning, Tony mentioned that the bank in its 16th ADF replenishment, set up the climate action window. And its first call for proposal focused mainly on adaptation. And I think that the responses we got to the adaptation call, showed us that indeed there are projects available in the continent. And of course, I guess depending on how complex the instrument they are trying to assess is, that could also discourage participation. So I wanted to mention that, yes, there might not be, depending on the fund you're targeting, of course, you will have to prepare your project in line with that. But there should be more like a diverse ways in which countries, especially vulnerable countries, can be capacitated, and the institutions in those vulnerable countries can be capacitated using more simplified approaches for them to assess funding windows. So the climate action window is one of them, and the response to the call showed that yes, indeed there are projects available, and maybe to some extent, and again going back to the ACCF point of view, when we started normally for ACCF, for you to access the fund, we launch calls for proposals, and the funding window is between $250,000 to $1 million, and for countries looking to develop investment-ready projects that can make some very meaningful contributions. So when we started, we launched a call, countries applied. The first set of countries that applied, we realized that indeed maybe the technical capacity to do was not there. So they then launched a request for proposals for external firms to support them to develop these projects within. So they already have a pipeline of projects, and you can tell that when institutions are ready with pipelines of projects, when these calls for proposals come, they jump on them. And you can see certain countries, I'll not mention, have like I think a drawer full of projects that they are always going to. And so I think you made this point on the other part. It's very important that institutions find budgets, budgets within their own budgets, as well as, external funding, technical assistance grants, if available, to prepare these projects. These funds, prepare them when the opportunity comes, you dip into that drawer, reprogram it, and then put it out there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Maybe just to follow on the same question, yes. What can we learn from your part of the world?
Yes, and I know the timing is on over us, so I'll not take a lot of time. So as far as collaboration is concerned, we did one very innovative thing that we got hold of an Indian project exporter and a borrower country, and I can name the country, it was Mozambique. And in their endeavor towards sustainable finance and capacity building, we came out with a project where we gave the funding, and that was a transfer of technology to manufacture PV solar modules in the country. So we had an Indian exporter. We did it in Mozambique, and that also was a dual benefit, that it resulted in a reduction in imports of Mozambique, because they now want to move, as other countries, they want to move towards sustainable finance. So we did that three-way tie-up, and the project was very successful. And as I said, it was a dual benefit for Mozambique as a country, who got the PV modules manufactured in their own backyard, reduction in imports. That also helps you in in better management of the forex reserves. So that was one example or one model of a collaboration and a partnership which really helped in this sustainable finance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please forgive me for not giving you an opportunity to ask questions, but I guess we can have a way of capturing the questions that have come through and try to respond to that. Unless you're generous enough to give us 2 minutes or so, and we can take 1 or 2 questions. Is that a yes? Oh, we've got 10 minutes. Oh, thank you very much.
That's good.
Yeah, I was sweating a bit there, so thank you very much. I guess we'd appreciate it if you can reflect the questions on the screen, and then we will take them up. I hope I'll be able to read from here.
Or maybe there are no questions, they've understood everything that we have said.
I don't see anything coming up. Is it fine if we just take from the floor?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a mic available that we can be roaming. I would hope to, get some questions even from, our working group, based on the discussions that we've been having. Sorry to put you on the spot, and I'm sure the panel can respond to that. I see a hand at the back there.
Thank you. My name is Noah from Uganda. I serve at ABI Finance as the head of Green Growth and Business Development Services. Mine is a simple one about the promises, especially from GCF, which looks to us like the most important target for green finance. What do we have from your side in terms of reduction of the turnaround time for projects? And the reason I'm asking is we are told, because we, for example, are attempting to apply, that even when you are able to submit all that is needed, it's still a miracle to get money within 18 months. That's 1 year and a half. Even if you had a drawer full of projects, how do we get to those who want to go and invest and tell them that, yes, we've received your application, we've processed your project, but to access financing, you need to wait for another 1 year and a half. We know those who have tried the process and are at now about 5 years, that's half a decade. So some of these projects are even obsolete by the time the money is available. What do we have in terms of turnaround time to at least achieve at least a 6 month turnaround time, not half a decade? Thank you.
Thank you so much. A final question from the floor? Final question.
Hello, my name is Andrew. I am the patron of the Friends of the Globe Climate Change Adaptation Society. And my question is, most financial institutions, they usually do share information in terms of data and in terms of how they are articulating issues even on financing. Now, in terms of climate financing and the global warming and climate action projects, do you have a mechanism that can be able to at least get data and get information so that you may find that some institutions will finance only to certain organizations and the same organization. So you find some of the micro organizations sometimes are not reached by the resources from the financial organization doing the climate financing. Do you have a mechanism to get that data in all the African states that you can be able to substantiate or to be able to differentiate when you're doing financing? Thank you.
Thank you so much. A final question, please. And for the panelists, please keep your responses brief, but at the same time slow for the translators. Thank you. Go ahead. 1 minute.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Tokumbo Nosanya from the Nigerian Development Financial Institution. I can tell from the first session and now this that quite a lot of things have been said about not being able to access finance in green. Now, my question or concern is basically around the fact that I can tell that a lot of financing organizations are doing quite a number of things on their own in trying to help different governments and all of that build capacity. For me, two things. Is it possible to have a central working group, action group, championed by probably the AFDB, integrated with the IFC, EXIM, and all the other panelists that are, well, the major financing companies that are here, and then with the African Financial Development Institution helping to integrate this so that we can have a template that allows for some form of training across board. Because you can tell there are two things. Instead of chasing after just the money is there, we cannot access it, why don't we look at two things? Accreditation, which we have said only 3. That is unacceptable. Only 3 organizations are able to do that. So we need to broaden the scope. Have a wider net of people who are being trained by accumulation of an integration of all these financial companies who know what is needed. That's one. The second thing is to be able to get them to know what is needed in building capacity. Is it possible to have that action, the working group that integrates all of these things together? Thank you very much.
Olympus, over to you, 10 minutes.
Thank you very much for the questions. If I understood correctly, I think the first question was pretty much addressed to the GCF. And unfortunately, as we've mentioned, we just heard the video from them. They are not present to answer. I wish they were, but they are not here. I think an attempt from my side to answer would be to say, the work, for example, that we are trying to do within the working group, ADFI working group, is really to develop some sort of convening power to be able to, I guess, push the African agenda or the DFI, African DFI agenda with the GCF in a way that hopefully we can start to see a change in relation to the challenges that you have mentioned. And I'm very much familiar with the challenges that you have mentioned. We have a project that took 3 years before it could be funded. So, very close to half a decade that you referred to. But I think the other 2 questions talking to, I think, the sharing of data, and I think the other one is related to what I've just mentioned. I'll just give it over to my colleagues and see who would want to take that. Maybe let's start with the data one. I wonder if he's well positioned for GGGI.
Thank you. So on the question of data, I cannot really speak at the international level, but at the national level, I can be able to speak as to regards to what GGGI has been doing. One of the ways we support countries is the development of what you call monitoring, reporting, and verification systems. A lot of countries do submit their NDCs, they're not in their LT-leds. But one thing they do omit is to have a very solid monitoring, reporting, and verification system that can be able to absorb data, capture the data, store the data, and allow countries to actually make evidence-based policies and decisions based on the data that is existing in their countries. Now, one interesting ways in which I can say GGGI does when it works with member countries in MRV system development is that we ensure that the MRV systems are stored in one of the ministries, and we build the capacities of the local ministries to be able to first collect the data, second, ensure that the data is usable, and third, store the data. We don't use international consultants to do that because we believe that international consultants, when they do support with MRV systems, it is fly in, fly out. So when they fly out, there's also that loss of data. So how do we maintain data within the region in order to ensure that data is always being compiled and a country can always reach out to the MRV data tool to be able fast to develop the NAPs, their NDCs in terms of updating them, and most importantly, their LTLAs. And we've been able to do this in Burkina Faso and also in Ethiopia. And it was in COP27 that they officially launched their LTLAs. And these are the only 2 countries in Africa that have launched their LTLAs. I think we can do a little bit more, but however, support has to come from countries. Countries need to understand that they have a data gap. They need to store the data, and most importantly, build the capacity, especially of the statistical ministries, to know what is the correct data that needs to come from the relevant ministries. Through that process, we have been able to see that interministerial coordinations become much more strengthened. Agencies are able to communicate and collaborate with each other in terms of data transfer, data storage, and in that process, you have much more enhanced capacity building. So this is what I can mention in regards to monitoring, reporting, and verification system as a tool for data storage.
Thank you very much. I think the last question was talking about really having a platform in place, a common platform in place, where there can be lessons sharing, I guess, common capacity development.
Thanks. I was looking to David to answer that question because it's what the AFAC seeks to do. It's a coalition of all the African financial institutions, and I don't know if the gentleman at the back, his institution is part of this alliance, but the idea is that you build the capacity of the alliance of the various institutions. You show them examples of how you can do that concretely. I mentioned the Tanzania example, but this is knowledge that will be shared with the AFAC, the larger coalition, to show them that this is how you do it. So the platforms exist. Sometimes maybe when we go to these forums, we are mentioning them for the first time, so you might not be familiar with it. But David is here, and I'm sure Olympus, you're also very much aware of AFAC, and I think there's a partnership with ADFI. So that's something that the financial institutions on the continent are actively trying to correct, so that that information comes to all the members and be able to utilize it. I hope it answers your question.
Thank you very much. I think I've exhausted the moderator's generosity with regard to time. I hope you found the session fruitful, and I'm sure the panel members would be available after this if you wanted to have direct engagement. But I think the call to action from the chairperson was quite clear. It's moving away from talking to doing something. We are talking within the ADFI working group that we might not be received well if the next time around we talk about the number of meetings that we have had without showing any concrete action. So I hope this all provide the impetus for all of us to move away from just talks to action. Thank you very much for your attention, and I think we have come to the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much indeed. We appreciate it. Applause to them once again. Mr. Olympus, I'm take a group photo, please. Another beautiful round of applause. Thank you so much. And if we could kindly, let me get the technical team to help me with the podium up here. The technical team. But in the meantime, we have 2 presentations, 10 minutes each. Actually 15 and 5. But in the meantime, let's just be upstanding for a moment. We've been seated So thank you so much. The technical team, please help me with the podium there. Simple, in Africa, our culture, our songs, our dances. So if you don't know how to dance, all you have to do is just this. 3, 2, 1, we're gonna jump up, let's go. Everybody, 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 hey, come on. I can see Thabo there. Come on, come on, fantastic. That's it, energy, well done. Give yourselves a big round of applause as you take your seats. Thank you so much, well done. Well done, well done, well done. Ladies and gentlemen, ready to engage? Learning. Our brother from Gambia said discussions, but also discoveries. And now we want to look at just transition and the role of development finance institutions. This particular project aims to explore the strategic importance of aligning Africa's nationally determined contributions with a just transition narrative within the context of sustainable development and climate action. The study assesses the capacity constraints and opportunities for accelerating the implementation of low carbon energy development strategies across the continent. 15 minutes, get ready to learn, to grow with impact. Please welcome.
He has an extensive professional history, including serving as CEO of Mercy Ships Southern Africa and working as a corporate social responsibility consultant. He has also made notable contributions to the renewable energy sector, pioneering innovative approaches in socio-economic development, enterprise development, and public-private partnerships. Please welcome Senior Researcher, Center Sustainability Transition, Stellenbosch University, South Africa, Dr. Rick Amanshua.
Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Program Director. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and specifically to Advi for inviting me to be part of this platform. If my colleagues at the back can just put up the PowerPoint. I almost didn't recognize the guy on the screen. I'm sure they grabbed that from the website. But as you can see, we actually do dress. It's t-shirts only at home. But I want to start off with this analogy. So a lot of information has come out today. And that's important. Knowledge is important. And I will share more knowledge with you. But it is wisdom that will be required for us to map this roadmap. And just to give you an illustration of the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Now, you might have heard this before. But knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing that you don't put it in a fruit salad. And that's what it needs. So all this information, and I must say, this research that I'm doing is ongoing. We haven't drawn conclusions yet. And the idea is to take all this knowledge and make it available in a guidebook, a toolkit for people to access. And I've gained a lot of wisdom through what has been said. A lot of what I'm going to say has already been corroborated by the statements that have been made from the different speakers, but also from the panelists. and the questions that have come from the audience. So we're looking at the role of DFIs in the just energy transition and its response to climate change. And we've heard a lot about that, but I want to share some thoughts with you. Let's start with Germany. Let's start outside of Africa. Total population, 83.2 million. Total electricity production, 2022, 589,000 gigawatt hours. Largest sources of energy generation, coal 33%, natural gas 16%, wind 21%, solar 10.3%. Approximate yearly carbon emissions, 665.5 million tons. Just pause on that one. France, total population 64.7 million, total electricity production 475 plus gigawatt hours, largest source of electrical generation, nuclear 62%, hydro 10.7, natural gas 9.5. Carbon emissions 297.5 million tons, 0.93% of global emissions. Now let's look at Africa. Number of countries, 54. Total production of population of Africa, 1.4 billion, depending on which statistics you use. Total electricity production, 890,000 plus gigawatt hours. Largest sources of electricity generation, natural gas 42%, coal 28%, hydro 17.5%. Total carbon emissions, 1.4 billion tons, roughly 4%. Some have said 3%, others say 2%, depends on the statistics. So why am I sharing this with you? Combined total population of Germany and France, 147 million compared to 1.4 billion in Africa. Total electricity production, 1 million plus gigawatt hours for France and Germany, 890,000 for the whole of Africa. Total carbon emissions, and this is where we get our data from, 3.1%, and Africa being 4%. Now that is shocking. Two countries produce more power than an entire continent. If that is not a case for funding the just transition and climate change funding in Africa, I don't know what is. I struggled with naming the slide because you can interpret that data in one of two ways. You can either see it as shocking and saying, wow, there's so much to do, or you can look at it as an opportunity to do more. But the truth is, if this situation continues and we continue to frustrate the production of electrical energy in Africa, and Africa has to make more use of fossil fuels, then global emissions will increase exponentially. The Earth's temperature will continue to rise unabated. The goals of the Paris Agreement will never be reached. This is a fact. And so when we come together to say we want a greener future Africa, this is the alternative. A fossil-fueled Africa is unthinkable. Everybody loses if that ever happens or is allowed to happen. And this is, I'm so glad to be a part of a group of people determined not to see this happen. And for that, you must give yourselves a round of applause. I applaud the DFIs who have made this a strategic move in all of their strategies. The challenges remain, and this is drawn from the Nairobi Declaration. Many African countries face disproportionate burdens and risks arising from climate change. Unpredictable weather events and patterns, including prolonged droughts, devastating floods, and wildfires, which cause massive humanitarian crises,